Welcome to another Euro Fantasy video and podcast. This will be all the predicted lineups for the 24 teams participating in Euro 2024. It has put a lot of time to put together, do the research and make the graphics, so any support is greatly appreciated. And if you want to see more videos and content for Euro Fantasy ranging from the best players in each position, best budget players, also players to avoid, as well as team selections and deadline streams, then smash the like button and subscribe for new. Our aim is to get this video to the 200 likes on YouTube and to keep on pushing towards 24,000 subscribers and beyond. And 24k is the aim by the end of the Euro 2024 fantasy tournament. Check out all the other links in the description below for my Patreon, the Championships Discord server, the Euro Fantasy League, and much more, such as Spotify. And be sure to join that Euro Fantasy League and see if you can win the FPL Dylan Mini League. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. We're starting off with the host Germany, who have Scotland in Matchday 1 on Friday the 14th of June at 8 PM UK time, and we'll be doing the deadline stream if you want to see that 2 hours before the deadline, so be sure to tune in for that as well. Now, Germany have played 2 friendlies before the Euros has begun, and they drew 0-0 to Ukraine, and the most recent game was against Greece. They were 1-0 down, Kai Havertz scored the equaliser, and Pascal Gross scored a late winner, and this is likely going to be the starting 11 for Germany, with Manuel Neuer in goal, one of the best goalkeepers of all time, a back four of Joshua Kimmich, Jonathan Tah, Rudiger, and Mittelstadt, who's a 4 million defender, and he could be one of the best budget options. I'll be sure to cover him in future content as well, because I think he could be one of the very best defenders in the entire game. Unfortunately, Joshua Kimmich, he's a quality player. He started off as a right back, but in this game, he's classified as a midfielder and he's playing in the right back position, just like he has done for Bayern Munich in this campaign. He started off quite slowly. There were some problems between him and Thomas Tuchel. He was being subbed out quite early, being on the bench in other games, but he ended the season strongly, and I think he could be quite good in the midfield still, despite being out of position in a negative sense, being actually further down the pitch, which isn't really what you want to see from your Euro Fantasy assets. The 2 defensive midfielders or 2 central midfielders should be Andrich from Bayer Leverkusen and Toni Kroos, and this will be his last tournament as a football player, and let's see if he goes out with a bang. He actually said that Germany will win Euro 2024, so let's hold him to that and see if that pans out. Now, the 2 wingers should be Musiala and Wirtz, but you could see some alterations. They also drift into central areas, because you have to say both players are actually best just behind the striker, which is where Ilkay Gundogan could be, and Kai Havertz will be the starting striker for Germany. That is confirmed by Nagelsmann, and he will be starting over Füllkrug, so I wouldn't go for Füllkrug personally, and I'll probably cover this in future videos and podcasts as well. Apart from Scotland, Germany have Hungary in Matchday 2 and Switzerland in Matchday 3. All of the FDR kind of classifications which you see in FPL, these are based on kind of the way I see these fixtures. You may disagree, and I completely understand it, but leave any constructive criticism in the comment section down below. The same goes for if you believe other players will start instead. For example, some of you think Sane will start over Wirtz, and that could be the case. We see a lot of these players sharing minutes. One of them plays 45 minutes, then the other one comes on during the second half, and that could result in some surprise inclusions in the starting 11s going into Matchday 1. But the top 3 options from Germany, in my opinion, are Mittelstadt in first, if he is able to nail down that left back spot, and it seems that will be the case, but David Raum is still going to be a tough competitor for that left back spot. In second place, I'd probably go for Kai Havertz at the moment. He's in great goal scoring form for Arsenal and Germany. And in third, I would go for Wirtz, who is one of the best players in the last campaign for Bayer Leverkusen. He hasn't done it yet on the international stage with only 1 goal and 4 assists, but I think Euro 2024 could be his breakthrough tournament on the international stage. Next up is Scotland, and I have to say the striker position is probably the one that I'm the least confident about. But starting from the back, Gunn is the 4.5 million goalkeeper. They've got a back 3 of Porteous, Hendry and Kieran Tierney, 2 of them being 4.5 million and Kieran Tierney being 5 million. You've got Gilmore and McGregor as the 2 more defensive midfielders and playing in those central areas. You've also got Ralston and Robertson as the fullbacks, with McTominay and McGinn just behind Che Adams, but it actually could be Shankland, who has started the last 2 friendlies, and Scotland beat Gibraltar 2-0 away from home, and they also drew 2-2 to Finland very recently, and Shankland scored in that game against Finland, so that could be one to look out for. And Che Adams didn't play a single minute in that match against Finland. So if you think that Shanklin will start over Che Adams, be sure to let me know. And if there are any, people watching from, let's say, Scotland, or for each single team, you know a bit more than I do about some of these squads, then be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Other points of contention include the centre-back position. It could be McKenna over Porteous, and you've also got Dykes being injured, so Shanklin is the one at 5.5 million that could provide stiff competition to Che Adams for that striker position. So that's going to be a very close battle. Scotland face Germany in the opener, then it's Switzerland and Hungary. I think Scotland would probably be favoured to finish third or fourth in this group, but I think it's quite a balanced one overall. I think Hungary are quite underrated, and Switzerland are always a tough team to face in the Euros and World Cup. So I think this group could provide some surprising results and very, very close battles. I think, honestly, all four teams have a good chance of going through to the next round. Germany are the favourites, and they've obviously got that prestige on this stage, but don't rule out Scotland, Hungary or Switzerland. I think it could be well poised for a very competitive and tight group, and I think this 3-4-2-1 formation is what Scotland will go for, but ultimately that striker position is definitely up for grabs, with Shanklin showing some great form in recent weeks. Another team that could play 3-4-1-2 is Switzerland, but they play different formations depending on the opponent. Sometimes it's 3-5-2, 3-4-3, or they play a back four, but it ultimately depends on who they're playing against. Sommer should be in goal at 5 million, with Fabian Schär, Akanji, and also Elvedi as the three centre-backs, and Akanji is very good for ball recovery, so watch out for him. But Fabian Schär at 4.5 million, the same goes for Widmer. I think those two would definitely pique your interest. You've got Xhaka and Freuler as the two central midfielders, with Ricardo Rodriguez at the left-back position, and he has been a mainstay in the Switzerland team for over 10 years now, and we're approaching the final tournaments of his, but he has been very solid and consistent for Switzerland at centre-back and left-back, and also left wing back, as he has done multiple times for Switzerland. Shaqiri as well has an amazing record for his country, with over 30 goals and assists, so he's a very underrated player in these international tournaments, and he's only 6.5 million. The two strikers could be Vargas and Amdouni from Burnley, who scored 6 goals in the qualifiers, and Switzerland face Hungary, Scotland and Germany in this group. So I think Switzerland have a good chance of progressing. I think most of us would expect them to be, I'd say, second in the group, but ultimately it wouldn't surprise me if they finish first. They actually knocked out France in the previous Euros tournament, and their two recent results is actually a 1-0 win over Ireland, where Shaqiri scored, but this was back in March, and they beat Estonia 4-0, and Shaqiri scored a penalty, Elvedi scored at the centre-back position, Amdouni also was on the score sheet, and Zuba, and they face Austria today. So this video and podcast is recorded on Saturday, the 8th of June, so they will be facing Austria at 5 p.m. today. Let's see how they get on and which players they go for. Hopefully there are no injuries that happen in any of these games, and also in the days leading up to Euro 2024. But the main things to look out for is Mbabu will be fighting for the right wing back position with Widmer, and also if Switzerland switch to a 4-3-3 depending on the opposition, Elvedi will make way for Zakaria, who's priced at 5 million, who will play in the midfield. There are chances that Mbolo will start ahead of Amdouni if he is fit too, but I think based on recent form and what Amdouni has done in the qualifiers, he should be the starting striker for Switzerland. So once again, another team covered. Now let's go on to Hungary, the final team in Group A. Potentially a dark horse in this tournament, Hungary can cause any team problems, and it wouldn't surprise me if Germany struggled in this matchup. Galashi should be in goal, with Orban, Lang and Shalai as the back three, with Nego, Nagy, Styles and Kerkez as the midfield four, and of course Nego and Kerkez will be the two wing backs. Szoboszlai and Shalai as the two players just behind the striker, who's going to be Varga, and he scored 4 goals in 6 qualifiers, so he could definitely be one to look at. But once again, I have to say Szoboszlai is definitely the standout player for Hungary. He's only blanked once in his last 6 games on the international stage. They face Switzerland first and Germany in Matchday 2. But if you are using the wildcard or limitless in Matchday 3, I think Hungary can pose some very decent options facing Scotland. And I think Hungary could actually be the favourites in that match. So Don't underestimate Hungary, even in match days 1 or 2. But if you were using any chips in the group stages, I think using it in match day 3 and piling up on Hungary could definitely work out. And once again, I have to reiterate, for me, Szoboszlai is a very good option at 7 million, and he's by far the best that Hungary have to offer. And Hungary are actually ranked 26th in the world, and if you look at their recent friendlies, back in March they beat Kosovo 2-0 where Nagy and Szoboszlai scored, but recently they lost 2-1 to the Republic of Ireland and they face Israel later today. Let's see how they go in terms of the lineup and also the results, the overall performance. But Hungary are a decent team, very underrated in the grand scheme of things, and I think them and Switzerland are very tightly balanced in terms of quality. We are now in Group B, which is a very, very balanced group. You could argue it's the group of death, with Spain, Croatia and Italy all in that same group. Albania could be, you say, the weakest team of them all, but you never know. They could also cause problems as well. Unai Simon should be the starting goalkeeper for Spain, but David Raya is knocking on the door and getting several starts in the process, and a back four of Carvajal, Lenormand, Laporte and Grimaldo is very likely, and Grimaldo's had a great season for Bayer Leverkusen with many goals and assists, but he does get subbed off quite early for Spain and he doesn't start every single game, so watch out for him because he could either be a brilliant asset when he does start and also very frustrating when he is dropped to the bench or he is subbed off before 60 minutes, which is certainly a possibility. The midfield three will be Rodri, who's arguably the best midfielder in world football, Pedri, who hasn't been priced yet, which is quite surprising, and Dani Olmo, who was very impressive in the last Euros tournament, and he's priced at 7.5 million this time round. Yamal is a right winger here, but in this game he's classified as a forward. You've got Morata and Nico Williams, so some very promising young talent there in Pedri, Yamal and Nico Williams, and you've also got some more experienced heads like Rodri and Laporte, and of course Dani Carvajal, who was man of the match in the Champions League final. Now, the first two match days look quite tough for Spain, facing Croatia and Italy, but in match day 3, if you use the limitless or the wild card, going for 2 or 3 Spain players against Albania could definitely be a great play, to say the least. There are some points of contention in my opinion. Even Unai Simon isn't completely safe. In the last 10 games, Spain have been very impressive actually, with 8 wins, 1 draw and 1 loss, and those 2 games where they dropped points in, or in other words where they didn't win, were against South American opposition. They drew to Brazil 3-3 and lost to Colombia 1-0 at the West Ham Stadium, but their most recent game was against Andorra, a 5-0 victory, and they play Northern Ireland later tonight once again. But in that 5-0 win, Ferran Torres scored, Oyarzabal came off the bench and scored a hat-trick, and also Perez, Ayoze Perez that is, also scored, and he was the one who opened the game with that first goal. But overall, Spain could also be quite underrated. They're obviously nowhere near the levels they were a decade ago and in that golden era between 2008 and 2012, but they still have some quality players. I think Pedri and Gavi, for example, are top talents. It's a shame that Gavi will be missing this tournament, but maybe in future Euro competitions he could definitely be a star. And these 3 match days are quite interesting. I have ranked Croatia and Italy as quite tough. Let's not forget Italy are the holders of the Euros, and Croatia are always so overlooked and they cause the best of teams problems. They knocked out Brazil in the previous World Cup, reached the World Cup semi-finals and actually finished 3rd in that tournament, and they always go quite far in the World Cups, and in the Euros maybe not so much, but they could definitely go to a quarterfinals or semi-finals this time round, and Spain are another team that could do exactly that as well. My favourite players from this starting 11 would be Yamal, I'd say Rodri as well, and perhaps Grimaldo if he can nail down that starting spot at 5 million. Apart from that, I'm not a big fan of the other Spanish options, but Morata could be decent if he gets his shooting boots on. Oyarzabal could be a nice differential, but he won't be a definitive starter, and that's why I'm not going to recommend him too much despite his hat-trick in that 5-0 win over Andorra. So that is the starting 11 for Spain, and let's now move on to the holders. Italy could also go for a 4-3-3, but they are capable of changing things around and going to a back three in certain situations. Donnarumma will be the starting goalkeeper, and he was the best one in the previous Euros tournament. He's priced at 6 million, and despite how good he is for Italy, I do think that's a bit too steep considering the fixtures, and you also look at Italy in general, and whilst they've only lost 1 of the last 10 games with 6 victories and back-to-back clean sheets against Ecuador and also Turkey, I'm still not fully convinced he's worth that 6 million price tag, you have some better alternatives at 5.5 and 5 million as well. Now the back three will likely be Damian, Bastoni, and it could be either Calafiori, maybe a Serbi or Mancini. So that one is definitely not set in stone. I think a Serbi will start, but I'm sure Italians will correct me in the comment section. The midfield, so to speak, would be Di Lorenzo, Jorginho, Barella, and DiMarco. And those two wing backs in DiMarco and Di Lorenzo are particularly interesting. Then you've got Pellegrini, Chiesa, and potentially Scamacca up front, but we could see Raspadori or Orsolini starting over Pellegrini on the right wing. And once again, that left centre-back spot, I'm not too sure about, to be quite honest with you. And I also look at Scamacca, and some of you might be interested because he was quite impressive for Atalanta in the Europa League win, but he's only got 1 goal in 14 games for Italy, so he has a very poor record for his country, but maybe this will be the tournament where he kicks things off and starts to rectify things on the international stage. But that is my predicted lineup for Italy. Let me know which players you're interested in. The ones that stand out for me are DiMarco, Barella, Jorginho, and Chiesa. But apart from that, maybe a Damian or Di Lorenzo could be quite decent because of ball recoveries. They've both been very impressive in UCL Fantasy over the past 2 seasons, and that's identical to Euro Fantasy. But I'm not that interested in the other attackers like Raspadori, Pellegrini, Scamacca, or anybody else really apart from Chiesa. I think Donnarumma is a little bit overpriced. I know why he's 6 million, but I don't think he's really worth it when you look at the alternatives in goal. It seems like Croatia have played a 4-3-3 for ages, and certain players are everlasting, like Modric, who has been just ever present in this Croatian team. And Croatia reached a World Cup semi-final, a World Cup final in 2018, and they've always been competitive in the Euros. Livakovic will be in goal at 5 million. He could be a nice alternative to Donnarumma from the same group, priced at 1 million cheaper, and you would target Matchday 2 against Albania. You've got Stanisic at the right back position. He had a great season for Bayer Leverkusen, even if he sometimes played a part off the bench. Sutalo and Gavadio as the 2 centre-backs, and Borna Sosa. It's been a long time since we've spoken about him. He was also another one we talked about a lot in previous international tournaments, particularly I think in World Cup 2022 and Euro 2020. Modric, Brozovic and Kovacic is always the same midfield. You've also got Pasalic, Kramaric and Perisic, who has a great record for Croatia. But if I'm looking at this starting 11, the best players would be Livakovic, I'd say Gavadio. Borna Sosa, I think, is just a bit overpriced in my opinion at 5.5 million. If he was 5, then fair enough, I'd be recommending him. But really, when I'm looking at this team, I think Perisic and Pasalic would definitely enter my thinking, but they've also got some good options off the bench who could become starters, like Maya. He will provide competition for both wing positions. He has scored a couple of goals recently, 2 against North Macedonia in a friendly on the 3rd of June, and you've also got Pekovic, who could start as the striker, and Kramaric could move to the wing as a result. So the defensive line is locked in, Livakovic and that back 4, and of course that midfield 3 is absolutely going to start in this tournament. The only 50-50 calls are going to be in those front 3 positions, and I think Maya is probably the most likely to enter the starting 11. And in the last 2 friendlies that Croatia have played, they beat Egypt 4-2 and North Macedonia 3-0. They face Portugal on Saturday the 8th of June, so we'll see how they end up going by the time this video is released for channel members, patrons, and of course for all subscribers. But I have to say Maya would be one that could enter the starting 11 and also are thinking, and he could be a very underrated option in Euro Fantasy, but I'm not that interested in the other attackers that Croatia have. I think Perisic will be the other one I'm looking at. I'm not so interested in Pasalic and Kramaric, to be quite honest with you, and as good as Modric is as an overall player, I don't think he's really one to look at in Euro Fantasy for this specific tournament. I think probably his best days are behind him. He's still quality, of course, at his age. It's incredible what he's doing, but I don't see him scoring as many goals or getting that many assists as he probably would have done in previous international tournaments. I could be wrong, of course, and the ball recoveries makes all of these midfielders potentially decent options in this fantasy format. So that's Croatia also covered. There's only one team left in Group B, and that's Albania, who will definitely be overlooked by everyone, but who knows? Don't underestimate anybody in the Euros. There is a lot of red on screen with those very difficult fixtures against Italy, Croatia and Spain in that order for Albania. Unfortunately, we probably won't see a 4 million starting goalkeeper here in Berisha. It looks like Strakosha will be the number one for Albania in this tournament. He's priced at 4.5 million, but keep your eyes peeled for Berisha as he has started a recent friendly, but in the most recent one, it was Strakosha taking back his spot. So in the last two friendlies, Albania beat Liechtenstein 3-0 and Azerbaijan 3-1 in the latest meeting on the 7th of June. So all of their friendlies are done and their next game is against Italy on the 15th of June. So that's going to be a very interesting opener there for Albania. They're likely going to go for a 4-2-3-1 formation with Mitaj at left back, Jamitsi and Ismaji as the two centre backs, and Balyu at the right back position. The two midfielders should be Aslani and Ramadani. The three players just behind Broja should be Asani, Bajrami and Hoxha. Of course, some of these names might be mispronounced. I do apologize. If you want to correct me in the comment section, be sure to do so. There are a lot of teams and players involved. Don't get me started on Georgia because I'll probably butcher every single name in the sun when we go to that team. But Broja's price hasn't been confirmed yet. He scored in a recent friendly and he should be the starting striker here for Albania. They might be one of the weakest teams in the competition, at least in terms of perception, but you never know in football. Albania could cause Italy, Croatia and Spain problems. We might see some very low scoring games in this group, and they've got some quality players, particularly in Broja, Strakosha, and I have to say some of these attackers could be quite underrated, especially Asani in the right wing position. One of the favourites for the tournament is in Group C. We're talking about England, who have one win in the last 5 games, and I have to say they've looked very poor in the recent friendlies. They beat Bosnia 3-0. It was 0-0 up until 60 minutes and then the kind of gates unlocked, but I have to say England aren't filling me with confidence, and that loss against Iceland at home will definitely add a lot of doubt, and the midfield looked particularly disjointed, also very easy to bypass, and Iceland could have won by 2 or 3. They had some quality chances. You have to say England also missed some big ones through Harry Kane and Cole Palmer, but this should be the starting 11 with Pickford in goal, and I still think he's one of the best goalkeepers at 5 million, but I have to say this defensive line isn't as strong as the previous tournaments in World Cup 2022 and Euro 2020. Walker, Stones, Gay and Trippier should be the back four. Gay had a bit of an injury scare against Iceland, so that's one to look at. And there's also the likes of Kwanzaa, who I think will ultimately be dropped out of the squad, but also Lewis Dunk, who could be a 4 million starting defender for England. So it's between Dunk and Gay for me for that left centre-back spot. You've got Gallagher and Rice as the two midfielders, but it could be Trent taking Gallagher's place. 3 midfielders behind Harry Kane in Saka, Bellingham and Foden. I know some of you might think that Palmer will start. I don't think that will be the case. And of course, Harry Kane is one of the very best in the business. Despite missing some big chances against Iceland, he was clinical against Bosnia and he has been tremendous for Bayern Munich this season. His overall record for England is amazing, as I discussed in my draft videos. Serbia is the first game for England in Matchday 1. Then it's Denmark and Slovenia. So it's quite a good group for them. But I think Serbia and Denmark can cause problems. And to be fair, actually, Slovenia, I think, have won 8 of the last 10 games. So who knows at this point? They could also cause problems like Iceland did. But England are expected to win this group and to go far in this tournament. But there are some big question marks over the team selection. Some kind of quality players for England like Rashford, Sterling, White, and several more, you have to say, like Grealish, have all been left out. Harry Maguire is injured, and no matter what you say about him, he has been quality for England for a consistent time now, and he could be a massive miss, especially with all the other absentees in the defensive line. But this should be the starting 11 for England. Do you think this team can win the Euros? I have to say, I was quite confident a few weeks ago. I think England can still win the tournament, but the defensive line, I think, is what ultimately could let this team down. And also 1 or 2 team selection issues in the midfield, particularly that partner for Declan Rice, whether it's Mainu, Gallagher or Trent Alexander-Arnold. If Southgate doesn't get this spot on and the midfield balance is still not there going into the tournament, I think England could be one of the biggest underperformers in this tournament, and it could ultimately be a golden generation, so to speak, or a very promising one wasted. But some of these players are still very young. I think this England team can compete in future Euro and World Cups, but I think it's about time they win 1 Euros, because they've never won it before in their history. Only 1 World Cup back in 1966. Is football coming home? Let's wait and see over the next month or so. Denmark won this competition back in 1992 with the likes of Laudrup, one of the best midfielders of his generation, and they reached the semi-finals in Euro 2020 and were ultimately beaten by England in a very close game there. Kasper Schmeichel should be the starting goalkeeper at 5 million. You've got Joachim Andersen, Christensen and Kjær, so some very familiar names in this defensive line. Mæhle, who was kind of a fantasy hero in the previous Euros tournament, he's now 5.5 million though, not 4.5 million, so I have to say he's less appealing at the moment. You've got Højbjerg, Eriksen and Delaney as the three midfielders, and also you've got Christensen with Wind and Højlund up front. They've got Slovenia first, then England in Matchday 2 and Serbia in Matchday 3. And in fact, it was Eriksen who really stole the show in a recent game for Denmark on the international stage. I believe it was against Sweden, a 2-1 victory. Eriksen scored, created 5 chances, and not only that, he got an assist, and Pierre-Emil Højbjerg has scored in back-to-back games now for Denmark. He's a very underrated option at 5.5 million. He was in fact in my first draft, and a lot of people were saying, what are you doing? Højbjerg has 0 goal contributions for Tottenham this season. He was absolutely poor for them, but he can get ball recoveries. He's got a good record on the international stage in terms of goals and assists. So I think Højbjerg could definitely be one to look at. The same goes for Christian Eriksen if he can replicate that performance against Sweden on a consistent basis. They will play Norway later today, actually, once again on the Saturday, the 8th of June. So the timing of this recording might be amazingly bad, but it is what it is. And I still think Kjær at 4.5 million and also potentially Schmeichel as a 5 million goalkeeper option is decent. But ultimately, the players to really look out for here are Højbjerg, Eriksen, Kjær and Højlund. We have a few Milinkovic-Savic's in this team, which can cause some confusion. We've got the goalkeeper at 4.5 million, a back three of Milenkovic, Velikovic and Pavlovic, a midfield four of Zivkovic, Gudelj, Lukic and Kostic. Tadic and Milinkovic-Savic will be just behind either Vlahovic or Mitrovic. And at the moment, it seems like Vlahovic is slightly more likely to start in the forward position, but we could see certain games where both of them start at the same time. But I don't think that'll be the case against England, where Serbia want to be a bit more defensively solid and focus more on keeping England out and maybe securing a draw. But against Slovenia Matchday 2, for example, who knows? We could see both Mitrovic and Vlahovic up front together, and you could see one of them playing deeper potentially or on the wings, and then they alternate throughout the game. But really, Vlahovic and Mitrovic are pure out-and-out strikers, number 9s, and you could see a shift in formation if that were to be the case. But this kind of 3-4-2-1 or 3-4-3 is what Serbia will predominantly go for, and the only big real decision that Serbia have to make is either Vlahovic or Mitrovic up front. Slovenia will likely be the only team in the Euros to use a 4-4-2 formation, and they've got 8 wins out of the last 10 games, which includes a 2-0 win over Portugal. So I have to say they could be very underrated, and who knows, maybe in Matchday 3 they can cause England some problems. But Oblak, one of the best goalkeepers in the world, is priced at 5 million. You've also got Kanasic and also Blažič, Bijol and Jansa as the 4 defenders here, and I'm not really interested in any of them because they do seem very overpriced. You've also got the likes of Stojanovic, Serin, Elsenik and Mlakar as the 4 midfielders, with Sesko and Vipotnik up front. And Sesko, of course, is a highly coveted striker, and he's being linked to moves to clubs like Arsenal, for example, and he's definitely the one to look at, the one with a superstar factor in the outfield areas. They've got Denmark in Matchday 1, Serbia in Matchday 2, and England in Matchday 3. You've also got Spora, who should provide good competition to Zipontenik for the second striker role, and really Sesko is going to play no matter what, and you would expect, once again, those 4 defenders, of course Oblak in goal, and those 4 midfielders to start the tournament. But the only real doubt is that second striker role to partner Sesko up front. So Slovenia, watch out for them. They're in great form. They have faced some very easy teams with the exception of Portugal, but you never know. They could be one of the dark horses in this group, and a second place finish isn't out of the question. France won the Euros back in 2000, but ever since, only one final appearance in 2016 where they lost to Portugal on home soil. Magnan will be the starting goalkeeper at 5.5 million, but he is quite injury prone for a goalkeeper. So if he were to get injured, Bryce Samba at 4.5 million would come in, and he could definitely be one to look at in the latter stages of this competition. Now, this back four is likely going to be Koundé, Upamecano, Konate, and Theo Hernandez. I believe Konate made 8 ball recoveries in a recent game for France, and Saliba won't start for France. And L'Equipe, for example, have reported that the 2 centre-backs will be Upamecano and Konate. You've also got Pavard, who can play right-back and centre-back. And I have to say, I think it's a big mistake, but Deschamps, of course, is one of the best managers on the international stage, so he knows what he's doing. But you have to say, starting Upamecano is a bit strange, to say the least, but he can be a good fantasy option because of ball recoveries. And France beat Luxembourg 3-0 in a recent friendly, and back in March they beat Chile 3-2, and they also lost to Germany 2-0. They face Canada very soon, so we'll see what lineup they go for, and most of these teams will likely go for the starting 11 they want for the first game in the Euros, and potentially to be their main squad throughout the rest of the tournament. So a lot of these friendlies that are coming up that haven't been played yet will give us great insights into what these teams will end up going for. The 2 midfielders could be Tchouaméni and Camavinga, but if Tchouaméni isn't available, you could see Rabiot taking his spot and Camavinga shifting to the right-hand side instead. The 3 players behind Giroud would be Dembele, Griezmann and Mbappe, but Kingsley Coman is competing with Dembele for that winger spot. And the only other real doubts you would have is in the defensive areas and Tchouaméni's fitness, which will ultimately determine France's final midfield going into matchday 1 against Austria. Then it's the Netherlands in matchday 2 and Poland in matchday 3. These 2 teams faced off in the round of 16 of Qatar in 2022. So it's a very strong lineup. France have arguably the best front 4 in the business if you look at the Euros tournament, and their squad overall is very solid. They've got some quality players on the bench who can make the difference. There are some 50-50 calls like Coman versus Dembele, but ultimately, no matter who they put out, they're going to be one of the favourites to win this competition. The Netherlands can play many formations within a match, and depending on the opposition, they can change things and go from a back 3 to a back 4, but 3-4-3 is likely going to be their go-to strategy for this Euros tournament, with Verbruggen in goal at 4.5 million. He's one of the standouts in terms of budget goalkeepers. You've got De Ligt, Van Dijk and Ake as the 3 defenders, all of them at 5.5 million and above. Dumfries, Reinders, De Jong and Blind as the 4 midfielders, and then you've got Simmons and Gakpo potentially on the wings with Depay up front, but you could also see Donyell Malen playing as the right winger and either Xavi Simons or Gakpo dropping out, and they will be kind of the 12th option, so to speak, and the first option they kind of go to from the bench if they need to change a game or chase a goal. So they face Poland in matchday 1, France in matchday 2 and Austria in matchday 3. The only other real doubts you would have is Frimpong, who is one of the most owned players in the game, particularly amongst defenders. He started on the right wing in the last friendly versus Canada and got a goal and assist. So maybe you could see Frimpong playing as the right winger with Xavi Simons dropping to the bench, or maybe he shifts to the left wing and Gakpo is the one who goes down to the bench as well. And you've also got Koopmeiners and Veerman, who could take Reinders' place in the midfield. So this team is definitely not locked in. This predicted lineup could see several changes going into matchday 1, but at the moment this is what I would go for. I think the likes of Frimpong could be bench players, and even when he has started games, he has sometimes subbed out around 60 minutes, which doesn't fill me with confidence. He could be a player to avoid actually, but if you disagree, be sure to let me know down the comment section below. And let's now move on to Poland. I'm not sure why, but that song about taking the walk to Poland has kind of stuck in my head, and for the wrong reasons. But Szczęsny in goal at 5.5 million, a top goalkeeper. He is actually very good in terms of making penalty saves, but I think that's overpriced when you look at the alternatives at 5 million, like Pickford and Diogo Costa. You've got 3 defenders, though, who could offer great value, especially Bednarek at 4 million, and also Dawidowicz and Kivior, who makes a lot of ball recoveries, actually. But those 2 4 million defenders could definitely be ones to look at if you want that budget 5th defender in your 50-man squad. You've also got Frankowski, Piotrowski, Sliss and Zelowski as the 4 midfielders, with Zielinski just behind Lewandowski and Swiderski, who is a 5.5 million option who could also be looked at. Zielinski scored in a recent friendly for Poland, so he's another one to really look at, and he could be a decent option at 6.5 million. And Poland have won 4 consecutive games, which includes a 3-1 win over Ukraine, and they play Turkey on the 10th of June, just before the opener against the Netherlands. So Poland actually beat Wales in a penalty shootout to qualify for the Euros tournament, and they beat Estonia 5-1 as well to reach that stage to face Wales in that 0-0 draw. That was a very tight match which went all the distance. And of course Poland are also quite a tough team to beat at times, and I remember in the World Cup when they faced Argentina, they actually got battered in all facets of the game, but they only lost 2-0, and they can cause top teams problems on their day. They've got some top talent, especially in the attack. Lewandowski, he needs no introduction. He's one of the best goal scorers of his generation, and he started off slowly for Poland on the international stage, but in the last couple of years, he's really ramped up in terms of goals and assists, and he's translated that club form to his country. So it's a very solid 11. You've got some top players in there, especially Szczesny and Lewandowski. And in terms of fantasy assets, I'd probably look at the 4 million defenders and Zielinski. Austria have won 6 games in a row, so they might be the kind of favourites to finish 4th in this group, but I have to say, who knows? They could even finish 2nd or 3rd, and they beat the likes of Germany very recently. 8 wins out of the last 10 games overall. You've also got a 4 million goalkeeper here in Pence, who could definitely be very good in Matchday 2 against Poland. You've also got Posh at 4.5 million, and another 4 million option to look at is Lineheart, so definitely watch out for him. You've got Woba and Mueni at 4.5 million. Seaworld and Lima around 5.5 to 6 million, so they could also be options to look at. Lima was quite decent in UCL Fantasy because of ball recoveries. Not particularly great, but he can get you 3-4 points every single match day. You've also got Sabitzer, Schmidt. I'm not even going to pronounce the last name because I don't want to absolutely butcher it. And you've got Jodjeritz up front. I probably butchered him as well, so apologies in advance. But overall, you're looking at the defenders at 4 million and the goalkeeper. Those are the ones you really look at from Austria, and they're quite underrated. Watch out for them. Another team like Slovenia with very good recent form, 8 wins out of the last 10. I know they faced France in match day 1. You wouldn't expect a victory or a result in that match, but football is a funny game. You just never know. There will be upsets in this tournament, and Austria progressing to the round of 16 could be one of them. Belgium have 7 wins and 3 draws from the last 10 games, and they're unbeaten in 13 matches overall. Sels won't be the starting goalkeeper in the Euros. It looks like Castells will take the number 1 spot, with Thibaut Courtois being left out of the Euros tournament. And a lot of Belgian media outlets have been reporting this for some time now, that Castells will be the number 1. In the backline, we've got Castagna, Woutface, Vertonghen and Thiet. And to be honest with Woutface, we've got a 4 million defensive coverage who is likely to start in this tournament, but that isn't guaranteed. We could see the Bast at 4.5 million taking some minutes or starts from him, but Woutface could be the best 4 million defender in the game besides the obvious Mittelstat covered earlier. The midfield 3 should be Anana, De Bruyne and Tielemans, but there is a chance that Mangala will take Tielemans' spot. Up front, we've got Doku, Lukaku and Trossard, and some favourable fixtures against Slovakia, Romania and Ukraine. There is still a slight chance that Sels starts, but I don't think it's very likely, and this starting 11 is what I would go for. Of course, some calls like Mangala versus Tielemans is 50-50, and you could see a change in the left-back position with De Cooper taking minutes off Thiet, or maybe starting several games as well. So that is the starting 11 I've gone for Belgium. Back in March, they drew 0-0 to the Republic of Ireland and 2-2 to England. And recently, they beat Montenegro, where De Bruyne opened the scoring and Trossard scored a last-minute penalty, which was won by Doku. And they'll be facing Luxembourg tonight on Saturday, the 8th of June. So let's see what lineup they go for there. Once again, I hope there are no injuries and no complications, which results in some of these predicted lineups being outdated by the time this is published. But that is Belgium's team. They're the favourites to win this group. And I have to say, they are great for all strategies, whether you use the Limitless and Wildcard in Matchday 2 and 3, or save one of those chips for late in the competition. Ukraine were in quite decent form before these friendlies started, but they drew 0-0 to Germany and lost 3-1 to Poland, where Dovbyk scored. And I have to say, Dovbyk could be a very good option at 7.5 million. He has been in some of my recent drafts as well. And if you are looking to invest more money in the midfield and have to make sacrifices up front and go to a 7.5 million forward, I think the two that really stand out to me are Havertz and Dovbyk at that price point. But in goal, we've got Lunin at 4.5 million, Konoplia, Zabani, Matvivenko and Mikalenko. all of them at 4.5 million except Mikolenko in the left back spot. And in the midfield, we've got Stepanenko and Sinchenko, who is classified as a midfielder in this game, and he plays a more advanced role for Ukraine, and sometimes it's a 4-3-3 instead of a 4-2-3-1. And the three midfielders behind Dovbyk would be Sikonov, Sudakov, and Mikhailo Mudryk. And in Matchday 1, they face Romania, Slovakia Matchday 2, and Belgium in Matchday 3. So I have to say Ukraine look fairly decent for the first two match days, and you probably want to avoid them in Matchday 3. But you just never know. Maybe if Belgium win the first two games and Ukraine have no chance of finishing first and Belgium rotate in Matchday 3, you could see Ukraine getting a result in this matchday and perhaps some big scores in Euro Fantasy. But the players to look out for here from a fantasy perspective are definitely Lunin in goal. Maybe a defender at 4.5 million. Sinchenko at 5.5 million also appeals to me. But the best outfield player, in my opinion, is Dovbyk, who had a great season for Girona, winning the Golden Boot in La Liga. And he's also followed that up with a goal in his last game for Ukraine. But Ukraine have one more friendly before the Euros begin, and that's against Moldova. So let's see how they do on the 11th of June in that game. And after that, they will play Romania on the 17th of June. So let's see how they fare in this group. They're probably expected to finish second, but I have to say Romania, Slovakia and Ukraine are quite evenly balanced in the grand scheme of things. And maybe Belgium will disappoint as they have done in the last decade or so. And they could actually be in the thick of it. And it could be a very tight group in the end. A lot of these groups are quite unpredictable in my opinion, in terms of you could see some big upsets and maybe we are overlooking some of these more underrated teams like Ukraine. Romania are winless in the last 4 games, but they've only lost 1 of the last 10 matches overall. But their recent results don't really fill me with confidence. They drew 0-0 against Bulgaria and 0-0 against Liechtenstein. So maybe their defenders could offer some decent value, or Moldovan in goal at 4 million. But apart from that, I'm looking at their attackers and none of them interest me whatsoever. So in goal, of course, Moldovan, a 4 million stein goalkeeper, could be decent in match days 1 and 3. We've also got Ratiu, Dragusin, Burka and Banku, who's a 4 million defender. He's another one to keep an eye on. And in the midfield, we've got Sisaldu and Marin with Deman, Stanciu and Hagi just behind Alibek. And we could also see Dragus. He might start over Alibek up front. And you've got Koman, who is an option, and Sorescu, who could play instead of Man. But really, I'm not interested in the attackers. I wouldn't recommend any single one of them. And even Deman, for example, at 5 million on the right-hand side, doesn't really appeal to me. So I'm looking at Banku and I'm looking at Moldovan as 2 good options at 4 million potentially. You could see some ball recoveries in the defender position and a lot of saves made by Moldovan and potentially 1 clean sheet. But the lack of goals in their recent friendlies is quite concerning, and they are arguably in the worst form of any country going into the Euros. I wouldn't recommend any attacker or midfielder from Romania. I think Moldovan at 4 million could be decent, and Banku as well. Even the 4.5 million defenders like Dragusin could get some ball recoveries, but ultimately, I don't think Romania have many viable Euro Fantasy options. I would probably say the same thing about Slovakia, but they have 6 wins out of the last 10 games overall, and they recently beat San Marino 4-0, and back in March they drew 1-1 to Norway. They have 1 friendly remaining against Wales on the 9th of June, so we'll see how they do on Sunday. Dubravka in goal is quite a popular option in terms of we know about him from FPL, and he was 4 million in that fantasy format. You've also got Pekarik, Giomba, Skriniar and Hanko as the 4 defenders, so all of them at 4.5 million except Skriniar. You've got Soslov, Lobotka and Duda in the midfield, and up front we've got Shranz, Bozanic and Tupta. And really, I'm looking at this, maybe Bosniak up front could be a decent budget striker, and in the defence I think they have some decent options, and Dubravka in goal. But I'm looking at this and I'm not really too keen, especially in matchday 1 against Belgium. You could argue matchday 2 or 3 on a wild card, or maybe if you're looking for budget players in those match days, you could look at one player here. The same goes for Romania, but I'm honestly not too interested. In fact, I would argue that Romania have better options because they're priced at 4 million in Moldovan and Banku. So really with Slovakia, I'm not too interested, but of course I might be missing something key here. And I would encourage you to leave your thoughts in the comment section as always, and maybe enlighten me, because I might be overlooking some very underrated options. Maybe Lobotka, for example, who has been a quality midfielder in recent seasons. He might be very encouraging in terms of ball recoveries and get the odd goal or assist for Slovakia. But ultimately, you won't find me really recommending them much in the upcoming videos and podcasts. Portugal have won 9 of the last 10 games, and they have an almost impeccable record under Roberto Martinez, their new manager. Their only loss came against Slovenia, and they rotated quite heavily in that game. But you look at the starting 11 and some of the players on the bench. Portugal are one of the most stacked squads in Europe. They've got great fixtures in this group and some very good players in terms of value, like Diogo Costa at 5 million, arguably the best goalkeeper in the game when you balance out value, clean sheet potential and fixtures overall. Cancelo, Ruben Dias, Pepe and Nuno Mendes could be the back four, but Dalot could also come in with Cancelo shifting to the left back position, and maybe in terms of partnering Ruben Dias, you could see someone else instead of Pepe, but that isn't set in stone. Antonio Silva, if he were to start at 5 million from Benfica, he has so many ball recoveries in his arsenal. He's done it before in UCL Fantasy, particularly the season before last. In the midfield, we could see Paulinho, Vitinha and Bruno Fernandes. And up front, Bernardo Silva, Rafael Leao and Cristiano Ronaldo. This could be his last Euros tournament. In fact, it probably will be, but you just never know with Cristiano Ronaldo. He is still in a top condition physically, and he has that goal potential in him, as always. But of course, the levels have dropped naturally with age, but still at 10 million, he could be a very good option for the first 3 match days of this group stages against Czech Republic, Turkey and Georgia. And if we look at their recent results, so they beat Finland in a recent friendly 4-2. Before that, they lost to Slovenia 2-0, and they beat Sweden 5-2 back in March. They play Croatia at 5:45 p.m. UK time today on Saturday, the 8th of June. And they also play Ireland on the 11th of June. So a lot of friendlies being played there. They'll probably go for different setups in terms of the starting 11s and testing things out before their opener against Czech Republic. But Portugal are one of the favourites for this tournament with good reason. They reached the final in 2004 and won it for the first time in 2016 against France. And I have to say, they have some very good Euro Fantasy assets. The ones that really stand out to me are Bruno Fernandes, Diogo Costa and Joao Cancelo. Back in Euro 2020, just 3 years ago, a lot of us were saying that Turkey are one of the dark horses of the tournament, and I said it myself. And maybe this time round, when they don't have that same level of coverage or attention, maybe they'll actually become that dark horse when no one expects them to. And that's pretty much what it means, doesn't it? But Gunok at 4.5 million could be a decent goalkeeper option. You've got Selik with a lot of experience under his belt, the Roma player, Kabak, Bardaki and Kadioglu as the 4 defenders, Yüksek and Kalinoglu as the 2 central midfielders, with Yilmaz, Arda Güler, Kavici and Yildiz completing the starting 11. My favourite players here are Kalinoglu, Güler and potentially one of these defenders, and I'm looking at Bardaki in particular. I think the ball recoveries could definitely be in his favour. So those are the 3 players I'd probably point out. They've got Georgia in match day 1, so I wouldn't mind 1 or 2 Turkey players here. Against Portugal though in match day 2, I know football can be unpredictable, but if you look at the fixture and what you'd expect to happen, I wouldn't want any Turkey players for that match day. But then in match day 3 against Czech Republic, once again, Turkey could have some decent options and maybe 1 or 2 players could do the business for you. So Turkey will probably finish 2nd or 3rd in this group if you look at it on paper, but they've got some decent options in terms of value, especially their defenders, their goalkeeper, Kalinoglu and Arda Güler. Czech Republic have won 4 games in a row, and in their recent game, they won 7-1 against Malta and 2-1 against Armenia, and they also beat Norway back in March 2-1 as well. They face North Macedonia on the 10th of June, and we'll wait and see what happens there, of course. They face Portugal in the opener, which will discourage many of us from going for their assets, but you never know. They've got some decent options in terms of value, especially in goal with Stanek at 4 million. You've got Vitek, another 4 million option, and Zima, who's also 4 million. Holles is 5 million though. I'm not too interested in him as a result. In terms of the midfield, you've got Sufal, Saucek, Sadilek, Dudura, and Provod. And then up front, you've got Schick and Hoslik, the two Bayer Leverkusen players, and Patrick Schick will definitely be the one of interest. But those 4 million options in Vitek, Zima, and Stanek are the ones that really appeal to me. Now, you could see potentially Krejci, who is a 5 million defender, start over either Vitek or Zima, but if you see these 4 million defenders starting, they could offer good value, especially if they get ball recoveries as well. And with Czech Republic, you'd probably go for their assets in matchday 2 and or 3, but certainly not in matchday 1 against Portugal. And I have to say that 7-1 win over Malta looks incredible. They were down to 10 men and Malta aren't really a good team, to be quite honest with you. But Czech Republic could be a very, very interesting team in this tournament. They were in England's group last time out and they were fairly decent there. Schick scored a great goal and he had an amazing tournament. So if he can replicate that going into Euro 2024, you could see Czech Republic reaching the round of 16. If it wasn't for that matchday 1 fixture against Portugal, I think a lot of us will be more favourable with their 4 million options and Patrick Schick up front. The 24th and final team covered in this extensive video and podcast is Georgia, and I'm probably going to butcher every single one of these names except Kasia, who is a 4 million defender who averages 6.8 ball recoveries per game, so he could be great value at 4 million, even if Georgia concede 2 or 3 goals per game against Turkey, Czech Republic and Portugal. He could still offer you 3 or 4 points, potentially even 5 in certain match days. And if Georgia were to keep a clean sheet, you might even see a massive return from the likes of Kasia at 4 million, but they will probably go for a 3-4-3 formation, and they've got a lot of budget options here. And their striker actually scored in their recent friendly, and he's on penalties, so he could be one to look at. But I'm looking at Kasia as the very best option from Georgia because he's 4 million and gets a lot of ball recoveries in the process. But Georgia, in fact, aren't a bad team overall. They've won the last 2 games, including a penalty shootout victory over Greece where they kept a clean sheet in that game. They've got Diwali at 4 million. All of their centre-backs are priced at 4 million. And Mikaltse up front is the one that is the only attacker I'd consider at 5 million, despite the fact that their right winger could also be a 4.5 million starter, which is massive, of course, in Euro Fantasy. Kvaratskhelia is the star man. He's the one with a lot of potential. He's got a lot of quality on the ball. He's priced at 7 million. A lot of us would maybe gravitate towards him, but I'm looking at Kasia, their striker, and potentially other 4 million options to cover Georgia overall, especially match days 1 and 2. And there we have it. All 24 teams in the Euros have been covered with their predicted lineups. I've discussed some possible alternatives and changes that these teams could make in certain positions. Now, there could be other things that happen in the next few days in terms of injuries, or maybe certain players in training really earn a place in the starting 11. So things can certainly change. But for the most of it, I have to say that is what we'll see in terms of starting lineups for the Euros. And you can see a lot of budget options in this video and podcast. If you want to see more, where I highlight the exact 10 or 11 best players in terms of budget options in each position, then let me know down in the comment section below and smash the like button of this video if you want to see even more content like the best players in each position overall, players to avoid, team selections and much more, such as the deadline stream next Friday on the 14th of June, heading into the first match day of the Euros. Also subscribe to the channel if you enjoy my content and want to see all of that happen and be notified whenever I upload a video or go live. And I do plenty of live streams for UCL Fantasy, FPL, Euro Fantasy and World Cup Fantasy when that comes along. You can join my Euro Fantasy League and the code is JCRHjQ. There is an auto join link in the description below, and be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well. The links are also there in the description, Dylan RCM, and there's also my Patreon, the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. And follow me on Spotify and leave a 5-star review. It goes a long way to supporting the channel. There's also a great Discord server for all fantasy formats too. I wish you all the best of luck for match day 1 and the rest of the Euros tournament, and I'll see you next time.